Welcome students. I am going to teach about management approaches. Now we will discuss about the types of management approaches. Management approaches classified into 6 types. Number 1, manpower approaches. Second one, cost benefit approaches. Third one, social demand approaches. Fourth one, social justice approaches. Fifth one, intra-education exploitation approaches. Sixth one, demographic projection approaches. These approaches are not mutually exclusive. Each of these models, however, has its own premises and procedural logic and methodology. Manpower approaches is also known as the human resources development approaches. I will discuss about the manpower approaches. Manpower approaches is also known as human resources development approaches. This approaches implies that the social system for its efficient functioning and operation needs educated and trained people who have trained well-defined knowledge, attitudes and skills. It also assumes that the demand for such people, that is, manpower, is variable and changes with the technical, economic, and social developments. Education, training, and development of such people is considered as the human resources development due to that fact for maintaining modernization of a country. Human resources is as important as the other kinds of resources, since this is possible only through education. This should be considered to be the most important function of educational planning. When this forms the focus of education planning, this is said to be manpower of human resources development approach to planning. This orientation in educational planning emphasizes that educational system should be designed, or changes in educational system should be so planned that it should fulfill the country's manpower requirement. In other words, produce as many educated and trained people of different categories such as doctors, engineers, teachers, graduates, postgraduate, etc., as are required by the country for its various services. Short production or overproduction of these will then, for this point of view, be defect of planning or failure of planning technology. Educational planning in the USSR is based largely on this approach. Educational planning in India has failed to adopt this approach, as there is fast increasing unemployment in every field of manpower production. In education, a large number of engineers, doctors, teachers, graduates, and postgraduates are unemployed. This affects the national development adversely, while educational planning and human resource development adversely. While educational planning and human resource development should be essentially contributing to national development, Harbinson holds that we should visualize all kinds of educational institutions as skill generating centers. This linkage between such center is analogous to transmission lines. The manpower problems such as unemployment and skill shortage may be thought of as attributed to power failure in particular generating center. Manpower planning approach focus on solving such problems and tries to keep the main power needs of the country in the center of all consideration and choices. It emphasizes that education should be linked with jobs. This approach supports vocationalization of education, multiple purpose educational courses, trade courses, and selective higher education. This approach emphasizes a long-term perspective and a thorough study of the occupational changes and technological progress as well as a rise in educational standards. Short and medium term planning, as it's held by Sagula, is not very meaningful under this approach as the process of adjustment between education and manpower requirement take time. Then we will discuss about the advantages of manpower approaches. First one, according to this approach, educational holds a significant position in the country's economy and majorly contributed to the national growth, emphasizing the necessity of education. Second one, manpower approach does not need sophisticated statistics studies and can easily point out the extreme gaps and disparities in the education output pattern that need necessary antidotes. Third one, since the approach focuses on manpower needs of a country, it effectively guides educators and policymakers on how roughly educational qualifications of the labor force ought to be developed in the future. Then we will discuss about the limitation of the manpower approach. First limitation is manpower approach may overemphasize the notion of unemployment and underemployment, which may become a challenge to move towards the right kind of education, which may be development oriented and thereby creating its own job. Second limitation is educational planners in this approach get a limited guidance in the sense that it does not tell what can be actually achieved in every level of education, that is primary education, secondary education, etc. Third limitation is, since primary education, the first step of education is not considered to be work connected, manpower approach suggests the cubing of the expansion of primary education until the nation is rich enough to expand it. This is not a healthy sign for any country because it is primary education which lays the foundation of a developing nation. Fourth limitation is the approach gives a biased view of manpower needs which are mostly focused on the urban setting. Thus, the planner may give due attention to education requirement of semi-skilled and unskilled workers in the cities and vast majority of workers that live in rural areas. It is nearly impossible to make a fairly reliable forecast of manpower requirement for enough ahead of time because of many economic, technological, and other uncertainties which are involved, especially in a rapidly changing world. Then we will discuss about second type of manpower management approaches, that is cost benefit approach. This cost benefit approach is also called return approach investment rate of return approach, or the cost benefit approach is favored by yet another group of economists. In other words, overall cost benefit analysis implies a systematic comparison of the magnitude of the cost and benefit of some form of investment. All form of investment involves a sacrifice of present consumption in order to secure future benefit in the form of higher level of output or income. Cost benefit analysis provides a means of appraising these future benefit in the light of the cost that must be incurred in the present. Education as an investment means two things. First one is, as a result of training impacted by training institution, the pupil must acquire protective capacity, be in a position to add to the sum total of production, should do much more than what he was doing without education. Difference between the two should be called productivity ascribed to education. Second one is, the level of earnings of educated people must be higher to those of the people who are not educated. If this is so, it may be said that return on education is positive. But theoretically, investment in education, both at the level of an individual as well as the level of nation, is bound to be positive as long as there is no unemployment of the educated. Positive investment development upon a closer relationship between education and manpower requirement of a country. Education is expected to be beneficial to both of the individual parent want more education for him. More education and higher earnings are supposed to be positively related. That is why people want more education. But positive investment is always the case if other correlated factors are not meaningfully taken into consideration. Return on education may be poor or low. That is the case in India. In India, return on education is quite low. The relationship between education and the earnings of the educated people is very poor. Perhaps it is negative. It is common experience in India that a graduate clerk earns less than middle pass semi-skilled worker. It is therefore obvious that we have got to recognize our educational system with a view to giving it more productivity and work-oriented form of shape. Educational planning has to take note of this and develop a proper perspective for bringing about changing in the system of education. Rate of return on education approach of educational planning emphasize that changing in educational system should be so planned that the individual systems and the nation both are benefited by the education of the people in the country. In other words, it means that educational planning should provide for increase in the earning of the individuals with more education and also for greater contribution by more educated people to the economic and social growth of the country. This approach requires working out the cost of various types and stages of education and comparing them with expected returns in the form of benefits to the individuals as well as to the society. This approach has certain difficulties in actual planning. Measurement of return is not easy. They have development certain criteria, no doubt, but these criteria are not comprehensive enough. It is difficult to obtain data on cost benefit or cost effectiveness. Additionally, it ignores the non-economic benefit and indirect returns of education, for example, personal certification and cultural growth are of the individual and the society. Then we will discuss about the advantages of rate of return approach. First one is it is possible to measure or quantify the increasing in productivity of an educated person using this approach by looking at the age earning structure of the educated person. It shows the connection between the cost of gaining more education and the increasing in reimbursement which result from additional education. Second one, the analysis can show or propose the direction in which education system of a society should expand so as to maximize the earning competence of its citizens. Limitations of rate of return approaches. First one is at times salaries reflect productivity may be a wrong assumption. It is not easy to quantify the advantages that are obtained from investing in any type of education. Second one, differentials in the workers' income cannot be aggregated to additional education occurred in developing countries. It can be attributed to other aspects like family background, habits, primordial factor, and customers. Third one is some studies of them view that primary education provides the highest return to the society on the basis of calculations of social return rates for all education level. However, this approach does not agree to the same. Next one is certain complexities are present in this type of planning as it's need to be clarified and work out the educational investment that needs to be made and its corresponding returns in the form of a benefit that are gained by the individual and the society as a whole. The method to be measure the benefits of individuals and society is rather difficult. Then we will discuss about third type of management approaches. Third is social demand approach. The number of students trying to enter in schools or trying to stay in and go further reflects society's social demand for education. This is not the same as society's manpower requirement for economic and social development. The two may interact, yet they behave quite independently. Social demand for education as a way of growing faster than manpower requirement, leading on some occasions to unemployment of the educated. Mounting educational aspirations of parent and children and populations explosion account for rapidly rising social demand for education is most country of the world since the end of World War II. The crucial relationship between the social demand and the educational system capacity to satisfy it is a key point in planning for education. The gap between the desire for education and actual participation in the process of education may lead to several kinds of problems: economic, social, and political. There are different strategies and educational system can use to deal with the demand supply gap. It can, at one extreme, open its door, let everyone be in who wishes, allow them to stay in for as long as they like, and go as far as they wish. It may lead to bludgeoning enrollment, crowded classrooms, and probably a sharp dip in quality. This strategy may satisfy social demands or at least appear to do so, but at the price of a storm of protest about high dropout rates, poor quality, and the waste of public resources. India has been facing this problem since long. At the opposite extreme from this, there is a wide open system where the policy is that everyone is given a chance for a primary education, but a severely selective process governs who go on from there. This is the policy of competitive selectivity and the promotion based on individuals' academic performance. The strategy produces educated elite considered necessary for nation essential leadership. Both the strategies, if not judicially used, may be in deep trouble. Hence, educational planning is required to take the special care that a balance between the two is maintained. The social demand approach to planning in education emphasizes that all those who wished to take admissions to a particular class or courses should be accommodated, and educational planning in India has taken this factor into consideration. Educational planning in India has failed to strike a balance between the need based and the demand based approaches to planning in education. Many at times restricted admission to higher education has been advocated by experts and the educationists, but government has failed to check swelling crowds at the doors of a educational institution inability to incorporate an element of a rationality in the social demand approach to educational standards. Our university have been reduced to the level of Madras and the our schools and colleges to the level of herds. Social demand approach to educational planning emphasizes that the educational facilities should be extended in proportions to the degree they are demanded by people. But this does not mean that there should be no limited to educational plan expansion. So demand approach is not the only consideration that should guide educational planning and determine its social demand for the education may be unrealized and an attractive to of a social cultural environment. In the case, educational planning should not be wholly guided by this approach. In a country like India, where people live in a democratic setup, social demand for the facilities up to a certain stage of education has to be met. But this need not be overdone. Its social demand for education is given them whole of the weightage. It will lead to unemployment and widespread underemployment of the educated, which in turn may threaten the social and political stability. Then advantages of the social demand approach. First one is it is a suitable supporting political tool to meet the need to satisfy the demand of the general public. Second one, the approach provides the planners with most appropriate number of places where educational facilities have to be provided. Third one, this kind of planning techniques are most suitable where resources are acutely limited and such kinds of quantities of education are planned which will offer the greatest good to the greatest number. Then we will discuss limitation of a social demand approach. The approach in no way has a command over factors like price of education. Second one is the approach has no power to manage the absorption of trained personnel in the economy. Third one, the approach is poor in the sense that it does not in any way lay claim to whether the resources expanded or economically pre-arranged. Fourth one, the approach does not provide any kind of guidance as to how best to meet the identified needs. This is a social demand approaches. Thank you.